So Leah Gazan is an NDP member of Parliament for Winnipeg Centre, which she has represented since 2019. She is a member of Wood Mountain Lakota Nation, located in Saskatchewan Treaty 4 territory. Gazan is a leader in local, national, and international human rights advocacy. In the House of Commons, she championed motions to recognize the residential school system as an act of genocide and to recognize the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people as a Canadian-wide emergency and to immediately invest in a red dress alert system. She has also tabled several bills in the House of Commons upon upholding Indigenous rights, including Bill C-223, to develop a national framework for a guaranteed livable basic income in fulfillment of Call for Action 4.5 of the final report of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, along with Bill C-254 to add to the criminal code the incitement of hate through residential school denialism. In 2024, Leah Gazan received the Doris Anderson Award from Shadowland Magazine for her advocacy surrounding the red dress alert. And I'd like you to help me welcome Leah Gazan to the stage tonight.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
It's so nice to be on Treaty 1 territory, and I just actually wanted to start out by thanking Elder Bullflag and Elder Grey Eyes for such a wonderful prayer and land acknowledgement. You have won Academy Awards, certainly. I think very often we brush over talking about land and where the original peoples of these lands come from. And it's so rushed, we see the same sort of rushing as we see right now with the current government as they try to fast track projects and fund corporations at a time when so many people are struggling to get by. So it was just so very grounding to start off with such a thoughtful way. And I also want to thank you for the very warm welcome. It's odd for me. I kind of rolled through life, and now I'm a member of Parliament. And I'm always really humbled when I come to these spaces, especially community spaces, to share the little bit that I know in a world where I'm always learning. But I want to start out with some thank yous for the invites at Ending Poverty in Calgary. A special thank you to Rosemary Brown for all your Canadian Prosperity Initiative, Reconciliation Action Group, the Basic Income Calgary, and we're together Ending Poverty Calgary for this event. And I also want to thank the Kirby Center for hosting us tonight. So I always have notes tonight, and I kind of go along with them, but not really. So I often go with my heart. I was blessed to be the product of two parents that kind of got it and had good hearts. And they grounded me. And I thought, as I was listening to the elders, and you really warmed my heart, and I found it grounding. So I wanted to introduce who I am. I've done some things, but who I am. So I have two names that were given to me. The first name is Hayush. And it was given to my uncle many years ago, and it's translated Good Peacemaker Woman. And the second name, which was really touching for me to get this name. I don't know if anybody knows a woman, an elder named Judy De Silva. She has been a grandmother on the front lines of the grassy narrows struggles where they're experiencing mercury poisoning. and I went to fast in grassy narrows a number of years ago. And when I came out of the fast, she said, I have a name for you. She said, Red Sky Woman, for the work that you've done around trying to bring awareness and fight for justice for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, to us LGBTQI+, and I say that with pride, although Elon Musk came after me. She said, but this is why I shared this. She said, because no matter where you are at night, no matter what you're going through, no matter what you're facing, we all share the same sky. And that reminds me of many things. One, that we are responsible for each other, that we are responsible to care for one another, that we must walk through the world in non-judgment, because everybody has a story. And sometimes we don't take the time to actually listen to somebody's story. But we always have to remember that somebody was birthed from a parent, and whether they resided with that parent or not, everybody has at least one person who loves them. And all people, no matter where we find ourselves, we must always be kind to one another and treat each other with dignity and gentleness. And I share that because I've come to Calgary and I represent one of the poorest ridings in Canada. We certainly, our wonderful elder shared, Elder Wolflake, about some of the poverty that we see, the intergenerational trauma, the ongoing residue of colonial violence on the streets, inflicted primarily on Indigenous people, certainly in the city of Winnipeg. But as I come to Calgary, I've been staying at the Hilton Garden Inn. And, you know, I've walked along the streets, and Calgary has a lot of people that people are turning a blind eye to. Human beings deserving of dignity, deserving of safety, security, deserving of human rights, forgotten people. And one of the reasons that happens is, and I didn't know this teaching came from my grandmother. I think it stayed in my blood memory, and I've been saying it like it was my own, until my sister said, Grandma used to say that. I said, really? She said, when you take away somebody's humanity, you can justify the most unjustifiable acts. And when I look at the streets of Calgary, the fact that everybody's so opposed to harm reduction and safe consumption sites, when the whole city seems to be an unsafe consumption sites, that's called turning a blind eye to others' humanity. I wanted to share that because I've been talking a lot about it. Because, and I'll talk more about it related to Indigenous peoples, and certainly what you said, which is something I wanted to speak to tonight, about being homeless on our very own lands. Canada is facing a cost of living crisis. We all know that. The system is rigged. It's so rigged that this current Prime Minister found $25 billion, partly by which he will fund by selling off public airports and ports, to line the pockets of his corporate buddies. $25 billion. $13 billion. An additional $13 billion to spend on military spending to sell weapons or weapon parts to countries that are committing genocide, transporting them on planes. And it comes at a cost. It's come at a great cost. It's come at a cost of abandoning efforts that we've made, strides that we've made, investing in people and communities. We, in the middle of a cost of living crisis, a crisis of gender-based violence, a crisis of houselessness, we see a divestment from programs to tackle the issues of gender-based violence. We see co-investment funds with corporate landlords divesting from public housing. We see divestment from programs meant for poverty reduction, even though government after government has committed to eradicate poverty in the country. Canada's income equality ranks low, in fact, among developed nations, and continues to worsen despite our massive GDP. And when you add Indigenous peoples into the equation, we're close to 70th globally. That is shameful. Just last week, Food Banks Canada, and you probably already know this because you're good advocates on the ground, in the 2026 poverty report card found the poverty rate is at 11.1%, and that's a significant increase from the previous rate of 7.4% in 2023. 39% of people feel worse off than last year. 42% of people pay more than 30% of their income on housing. 66% of government support recipients say they don't receive enough to keep up with the cost of living. In fact, just down the street from where I live in the area where all the shelters are housed in Winnipeg, in an area called the Exchange District. Just down the street from where I live, at a shelter called Solo Mission, the largest growing population of houseless folks are seniors, over 50%. 24% of households are experiencing food security, and 28% face inadequate standards of living. And I sit there in the House of Commons, which I call, I won't say it today, you have a lot of say. Do you want to hear what I call it? Okay. I'm going to let it rip. I try to keep it in, but I am who I am. I call it a colonial, misogynistic, racist shithole. I call it, it's the doomsday. And I sit in the doomsday. Okay, the doomsday. And I have to listen to Pierre Poilievre talk about single mothers.
Yeah.
Okay? Which makes me gag because I was a single mother. I'm going to tell you my story a little bit. This is not my notes, but I feel it's important. I learn every day, and it's not that I don't see poverty, but it's like the zombie apocalypse out there as I drove with an Uber through people on the streets like this is a normal activity. And it just felt violent. It felt so violent. Really, it was like, this is wild. I was a single mom. Okay? I don't have a really sad story. I have, like many Indigenous people, I grew up with a mom who survived the child welfare system, 15 different placements between the age of 5 and 18, aged out of care at the time of residential school. March, you're on your own. See you later, buddy. Right? The same thing we're doing to kids aging out of care now. You're 18, you're on your own. We're going to drop you off at the local shelter. Good luck. aged out of care. At the time, my mom was quite brilliant though. While all the kids in the foster homes were running away, my mom was like, she said, I don't know why you're running away, they don't care about you, nobody's gonna look for you. And she kind of found another avenue for survival. So my mother actually became a scholar. She made friends with the local librarian. She met a woman named Maud Cameron who just saw how gifted my mom was and taught her how to play piano. And aged out of care when they have those phones, one ringing daily, two ringing daily, right? Became a phone operator. So she aged out of care, managed to finish her high school, aged out of care, and at the time there was no human rights for people that were in what they called insane asylums. And so they were paying people to become psychiatric nurses. So my mom was one of the folks, she was like, okay, well, I don't have money. They're paying for my education. I'll become a psychiatric nurse. My mom was actually one of the folks in Weyburn, Saskatchewan, who changed mental health legislation so that people that were dealing with different sort of mental health issues could live in the community. And although the program never looked like she wanted it to, she was one of the human rights defenders during that time for people that struggled with mental health. I feel proud of that. And she was also an award-winning psychiatric nurse. Social worker. She did a lot. My father was a Holocaust survivor. He was the only surviving child after the war. Came here after the war with my grandparents, 2 uncles, 5 survivors in total. Ended up in Ontario, why am I drawing? It's in Ontario, where they have a paper mill that stinks. Okay. Fort Francis. Okay, I got it. I was like, Fort. And he was a war survivor. My grandmother survived a concentration camp, came here, and so I grew up with a war survivor and a child welfare survivor. And my life should have been a shambles, but it wasn't. They kind of figured it out, and they, did the best they could. And I grew up in a middle-class family, and I grew up with a house, and I grew up not with all. My parents were never. My dad was a raging socialist along with my mom, but we always had what we needed, including. I'm going to tell another story about. My dad bought a used police car because we always had secondhand cars. And he actually drove from Selkirk to Winnipeg with the police car with the Legos back in the day. I remember this because it was the most exciting day of my life. He was a rebel, my dad. And he fought for kids, they spent their life fighting for human rights. But when you come from histories, this is why I felt I needed to share this. When you come from histories of genocide, and I come from a history of genocide from different parts of the world, it lives in your blood memory. Like a soul wound. And so I had some shit, baggage that I've had to kind of figure out, figuring out my grandmother. I wrote a story about my grandmother, like why she was the way she was, why she struggled the way she did, and making choices that I did in my life growing up in a middle-class family, not in poverty, trying to figure out how my intergenerational experiences impacted my decision and thinking. And that's really important. I married an asshole. Are you recording? Fantastic. He wasn't a nice guy. And, ended up in a relationship that was pretty abusive. Became a single mom after coming out of university with my son. I graduated. I didn't know whether I was going to give birth or get my degree. I didn't know which was going to come first. The ceremony was so long. Graduated, no income, and the only thing with an unstable, as a new mom with a baby, the only thing that kept me going was the fact that I had subsidized housing that was provided to us through his nation. That was $300 a month. And I was resourceful, so I would take all the coupons and cut all the coupons, and I always figured out how to keep everybody fed really well, and then I would stockpile diapers, because the worst thought in my head was running out of diapers. Because if I ran out of diapers, I would be failing as a mother to provide for my child. So there was like all this stress, all this stress going on in a very stressful household, trying to make ends meet. And then I woke up one day and I said, okay, it's over. Became a single mom, did the 3 jobs thing, I was really lucky though, because I had an education, but, to provide for my son who had some special needs, I had to, get a couple of extra jobs. And so I did that. So I kind of gag when I hear Polyev talking about being a single mom. In fact, I've called him out on that publicly in the House when he was the member of Carleton, I said, the member from Carleton likes to talk about about single moms. Now, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you for a fact, I know he's never been a single mother. He was not happy with it. But that's a story, and I share that story because it's important that we share our stories. Because you might look at me and think all these things, but at the end of the day, we're all one check away from being on the welfare. That is not lost on me. That's not lost on me. And at the end of the day, the way that I get treated now with status, title, and privilege, with being the same human being that I've always been, including a young person making choices, trying to figure out why I make decisions the way I do, I was looked at a lot different. And my opinions were thought of a lot less value. I wasn't seen as an equal human being with a gift to share. And when we see folks struggling on the street, when you pity somebody, you don't see their gift. And we're all on this path as teachers. And the gifts that, even without words, that they gave me before coming here, they're my teacher. They're my teacher. And I think that's important because there's a lot of stigma around poverty. There's a lot of stigma around being poor, a lot of stereotypes around poverty. There's a lot of stereotypes around addiction. And we need to be mindful of that. And we need to be cognizant of where our thinking and ideas come from. And I can tell you the one thing I didn't like when I was living in poverty is being pitied, because it felt degrading. Like my worth or lack of worth was amounted to a dollar figure and dollars that I clearly did not have. And I can tell you, my heart is the same, but my resolve is stronger as I've learned who I am over time, what a gift my history has given me, warts and all. So I shared that. I wasn't going to share that. But I'm like going, like, so I should have my phone because I'm a struggling, recovering academic, and I might have you here for 30, 40 years. So in understanding that, poverty, it's not really about what's right and wrong. Like, we have international legal obligations to ensure that all people live with security, dignity, and safety of the person. In fact, Article 7 of the Charter states that everyone has a right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and a right not to be deprived thereof, except in accordance with principles of fundamental justice. And I say that because the fact that there's people living in poverty on our streets, the fact that we have a growing crisis of houselessness, is a violation of human rights. And one of the things that I've often said is one of the most violent human rights violations is poverty, because poverty is a policy choice. Poverty is a policy choice where we choose to find $25 billion to line the pockets of corporations and these corporate bums that are going to be sitting on a yacht, drinking a martini, instead of dealing with what's going on in Calgary, right down from a hotel that people are visiting, spending big bucks to stay. And then right next door, there's people wandering the streets, nowhere to go. That's a policy choice. That is violent. Poverty is one of the most solvable, violent poverty choices that elected officials turn a blind eye on. Why? Because they'd rather stay with the sound bites that bash the poor and stigmatize people with mental health and addiction. They'd rather do things like in the city of Winnipeg. I got in trouble for this, and I understand why. I know with transit, there's worker safety and all of this stuff. But instead of spending money on social workers for people that might be experiencing mental health, in the city that I live in, they're now checking people at the bus stops to see if they have bus fare. That is a policy choice. How much money are they spending policing the poor when we could be spending that money on housing? Now, I got myself into trouble, but I was pretty pissed off because I know who they're going to pick on. They're not going to pick on a grandma with a little bag. They're going to pick on Indigenous folks. They're going to pick on people that have mental health issues. They're going to be picking on people that are struggling with addiction. They are going to be picking on the poor. I know that's what's going to happen. It happens over and over and over and over again, and it's become such a normalized activity that it just seems to be continuing on. Because whoever said that being poor means that you're going to be ripping somebody off? Because I can tell you who is ripping people off. It's the $25 billion to steal the lands, territories, and resources from Indigenous people when Treaty 8's coming out and talking about high rates of cancer. And they're leaving orphan wells And people who, on their very lands, territories, and resources, are robbed of their very ways of life to hunt, fish, trap, something that keeps you fed. Not just your belly, but your spirit and your community. So I won't complain too much. I'm totally going off script. Anyway, that's the truth. Because it is a political choice. It's a choice to violate people's human rights. And part of the issue is that it's not that when we talk about all of you here who are fighting for a guaranteed livable basic income, thank you so much. It's not that we're actually talking about anything new. We do have income guarantees in this country. GIS, an income guarantee, not livable. EI, income guarantee, not livable. Child tax benefit, income guarantee, not livable. We need to divest from this corporate welfare, because they talk about welfare, because that's who's getting all the money, it's not the poor. Okay? And we need to invest in human rights, dignity, and a guaranteed livable basic income. And one of the ways that we can do this is by totally shifting our taxation system. Why do we have a billionaire tax? Let's abolish billionaires.
Yeah.
I was talking I was having a glass of wine, and there's a woman there, and she said, I talk to everybody. I'm one of those weird people that likes to talk to strangers. And she said, like, somebody asked me what I would do if I won the lottery. She said, well, I would spend money on this program and this program. Like, who needs $5 million? I said, exactly. Like, how much do you need? How much do you need to live? We need to start taxing the ultra-rich. Because the failure to do so, we're seeing it on the ground now, ground zero. The fact that we have 5 grocery chains that are gouging at the checkout, the fact that I just at 54, I'm not a techie at all. It sounded like Star Wars to me, or Star Trek. But surveillance pricing, the fact that corporations are keeping track of what you are spending and then charging you different amounts at the checkout or online. The fact that a parent, and I remember this, formula is very expensive. Depending on your spending habits, can charge me one amount and somebody else another amount. That, we're talking about policing the poor. Why aren't we policing corporations?
Right.
Because it's socialism.
Right?
Because we're told it's socialism.
I love socialism.
I know.
Yeah, right. Like socialism is bad, but seriously, like who is ripping off here? Like, this is the myth of meritocracy. Like, if you work hard, you put in the hours, you do the work, you're gonna make it, and you're gonna do well, you'll provide for your family, and one day you're gonna own a mansion. Well, that's a load of crap.
Yeah.
It's not true. I was told to talk about this from an Indigenous lens. And we're not all born the same here. Like, as an Indigenous woman in this country, we talk about women's right to vote. I'll give you an example. It's been over 100 years since women were allowed to vote. Not for me. I wasn't allowed to vote till the 1960s. Part of the reason my grandmother, who, was in residential school, on her own when she was 12 years old, couldn't look after my mom. is because it was in the 1930s and she wasn't allowed to leave the reserve, right? What was a single mom when that was like, even to be a single mom, period, but to be an Indigenous single mom, you had to do what you had to do to earn a living. And I can only imagine what she had to do when she left my uncle and my mom alone in a motel room with a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter and jam to last for a week, what she was out doing to make money. We don't all have the same rights in this country. We do not have the same history. And if you look at what this government is doing right now, in terms of these projects of national interest, where on the land, once again, on the backs, the lands, territories, and resources of Indigenous peoples, where I met with the major projects office yesterday, if you can believe it. I thought, wow. I said, I'm going to go to the major projects office. I'm going to talk to him about my concerns about the violation of Indigenous rights, my concerns about, the total abolition of environmental policies in this country. And I did. It was wild. I never thought I would be in a major projects officer. I had been on the front lines. I was an organizer for Ireland War. But I certainly didn't think I would be there. And we had a discussion about it. Here, the whole country, we're in an economic recession. And who is going to be paying for it? It's going to be Indigenous peoples. On our lands, territories, and resources, and as we know, particularly in Alberta, and certainly Manitoba, where Manitoba Hydro is the cash cow, in northern Manitoba, where the second worst housing in the country is, by the way, on Indigenous lands, territories, and resources in Manitoba, that it's going to cause further environmental damage on Indigenous lands and impact our ability to hunt, trap, fish, treaty rights, because we spoke, our elder Wolf Lake spoke about treaty rights. It's going to impact our treaty rights to hunt, fish, and trap. It's going to impact our ability to feed ourselves, but it's also going to cause, exacerbate a growing climate emergency, and what happens? You get evacuated. Right? You get evacuated, and you get evacuated to urban centers, like Winnipeg Center, right? Where you're stuck in a hotel room without proper housing, schools, resources. So, when we're talking about poverty and Indigenous peoples, the very economic agenda that this current government has is going to be on the backs of Indigenous peoples. And we're going to see it more in cities where we see more what I'm calling environmental refugees. I have people that have been in my riding for almost a year. I wrote the minister a letter on May 24th, 2025, July 24th, 2025, I got a letter back, May 2026, May 27th, 2026, because I had written her a letter about the fact that we had so many evacuees in our riding that were not being provided with mental health supports, income while they were in town, proper housing, and reminded the minister in my letter responding that I want to remind you, Minister, that these are human beings who have rights, and you have an obligation to honor their charter rights. As we see a growing climate emergency, we must talk about the impacts on Indigenous peoples, but we also must talk about the fact that we need a guaranteed livable income to help people transition, but also to help people that are suffering the impacts of the climate emergency. Sorry. So the other thing is when we're talking about a guaranteed livable basic income, we talk about, people always ask, how much is it going to cost? And we have a lot of data on that. Certainly if you go to the back and you see Kim Pate's work, I've done a lot of work with Senator Kim Pate. She's one of my comrades and a true sister to me. There's a lot of data on it. But since I've been elected, one of my goals has been to fight for the implementation of a guaranteed livable basic income. And it has a lot of support. In fact, in Alberta alone, 60% of folks support a guaranteed livable basic income. And I don't want to offend anybody here, but you are a pretty conservative province.
Oh, yeah. We've noticed that.
And even in Alberta, 60% of folks support a guaranteed livable basic income. And people have been working on it across the country, and we have a number of folks here, anti-poverty organizations, disability rights organizations. The fact that we have a disability benefit that the government has put in place, that's $200 a month, is shameful. We need to replace that with a guaranteed livable basic income in addition to other supports and services meant to meet specific and special needs. Seniors advocates who have been on the front lines of this issue. And the message is really clear. A guaranteed livable basic income will ensure the human rights and dignity of all people. And this isn't special. This isn't anything special. This is an obligation in our charter. This is an obligation in Article 7 of our charter. And as legislators, we are responsible for protecting that charter. And again, going back, we can't pay for it. If they can find $25 billion to line the pockets of corporations, $13 billion to extend military spending, certainly they could have found the $86 billion that would start to a guaranteed income, basic income program that pays for itself, higher costs at the front end and lower costs at the back end.
Yeah.
And I put forward a motion, in fact, when I was first elected. I had 45,000 signatures, and it was supported by the NDP, the Greens, and some Liberals. Didn't pass, 63 votes. But there are people in all parties that actually support a guaranteed livable basic income. The bill that certainly Kim Pate and I have worked on, and I say Kim Pate, Senator Kim Pate and I, because we put forward the exact same bill with the exact same wording. Her on the Senate side, me on the House side. And the guaranteed income, that supplement that we were wanting to put forward was anybody in Canada over the age of 17, regardless of citizenship or immigration status. The fact that I am home in Winnipeg Centre to 70% of refugees that move into Canada, some of whom don't qualify for a child tax benefit, is problematic. Recipients would not be required to participate in education training or the labor market in order to qualify, and the benefit would not result in a decreased services or benefits that support individuals with exceptional health or disability needs. And because when you're putting a private member's bill, you can't have a dollar figure on it, it would force the government to determine what constitutes a livable income for each region in Canada. For example, it's a lot more expensive to live in Nunavut than Calgary. So it would take into account regional differences. And it has a lot of support. In fact, when I was on the status of Women's Committee, one of the recommendation that came up time and time again, if we want to deal with the issue of gender-based violence, is to put in place a guaranteed livable basic income for people who are wanting to leave. One of the reasons I stayed in the beginning was because of income. I needed a home, I needed a livable income. If we want to tackle the issue of gender-based violence, then we need to give people the financial resources they need to be able to make a real choice. In fact, over 60 organizations, when I had my bill put forward, supported it. So it has wide support, legal advocacy groups, medical societies, public health associations, local resource centers, economic security researchers, and so forth. Because the argument for that against the bill was, well, if you give people a handout, like I don't want to pay for somebody watching movies all day. And we know all the research doesn't support that. In fact, we know that people who are provided with a guaranteed livable basic income actually did things they've always wanted to do. Like, for example, go to school, get an education, get training in areas that they wanted to. I had a neighbor who ended up moving to Montreal. I miss her. She looked after my plants. She was, and when you're a member of parliament, you worry about your plants surviving because you're never home. She finally was able to do what she wanted to do. And for those of you who lived through a pandemic, every single one of us, I don't know about you, but the only thing that kept me alive during the pandemic was art. Movies, music, books, poetry. It kept me alive. If where are our artists? I think that we need to start considering art as an essential service, especially during the mental health. And I can tell you, if there was a guaranteed livable basic income, I wouldn't be doing this at all. I would have pursued my love of acting, something that I had done for most of my life. I probably would have become an actor, but I didn't have the financial means to pursue my dreams. So now I'm fighting corporate bastards and the theater of bullshit. So there you go. And we know it's good for our economy, especially local economies. For every $2, the Canada benefit which is a basic income. The Canada benefit grows the economy $2 for every dollar invested. It keeps 250 families out of poverty and contributes to 450,000 jobs to the economy. So poverty costs a lot of money. Caring for people, upholding people's human rights, upholding our charter is a good economic investment. It costs over $200,000 a year to incarcerate one woman in a federal penitentiary. One woman. Most of whom are Indigenous if you look at incarceration rates in Manitoba. Mostly related to crimes related to gender-based violence very often, mental health, related to addiction. Can you imagine if we invested that money in somebody's dignity and security? And it's not something new. For example, in Manitoba, we had the Minkum Project in the 1980s that was led by a wonderful local researcher, Evelyn Forget, in a place called Dauphin, Manitoba. And what they found from that study was that the cost for the healthcare system went down, the cost, people were happier, graduation rates improved. It was a cost-saving venture in the long run. So if they can find, like I said, billions of dollars to line the pockets of corporations, they can certainly find the money to start a guaranteed livable basic income that actually pays for itself. Because these boom and bust economies that they're talking about building an economy, good jobs for a while, and then for a pipeline, and then you need 15 people to look after it. Where do people go when they don't have that job anymore? We need to get out of boom and bust economies. We need to invest in the care economy. We need to invest in things like a guaranteed livable basic income. We need to do what Norway has done, although Carney said he was following Norway, and use the climate emergency as an economic way to improve the well-being of all people and take the fossil fuel industry and invest it in clean energy.
Right.
That's going to take change. Can you imagine if we could encourage people to get training in areas to join the care economy, to learn how to work in green technologies? Because I see a whole bunch of conservatives wearing buttons. I love oil and gas,
Yes.
right? I think it comes from Alberta. It's, certainly not from Manitoba. We're more like, I love hydro and canola. So that's more of our one. But I've never met anybody who had a love affair with oil or had an emotional discussion at a gas pump. Right? Have you? I haven't. I think people love feeding their families. I think people love having a roof over their head. I think people love ensuring that their kids have what they need, not just to survive, but to thrive. I think people just love having some dignity, some stability, some security. But we need to invest in that. We need to invest in a transition because you cannot transition without bringing people along. And a guaranteed livable basic income, especially in a province like Alberta, where people have been beholden to maintain certain jobs, in some of the hardest unhealthy work conditions around. You need to support people, and that's with the guaranteed livable basic income. I mentioned DOF in South Korea. They had a guaranteed livable basic income pilot project, and it resulted in 45% increase in local business revenues. So we know that it works. We need to invest in it. We especially need to invest in it during an affordability crisis, because we know poverty is keeping people sick. Poverty is keeping people sick, and why do we place the value on a person, on their ability to produce? Not everybody can work 5 days a week. Not everybody, hey grandma, get back to work. We want our seniors being forced to go back to work because they don't have enough to live on. People struggling, so many people in my riding, and certainly in Calgary where I'm staying, that struggle with mental health and addiction. Do they not have a right to live in dignity? Are they not worthy of a dignified life because they're not pedaling in a circle, doing the corporate grind to keep a society that's becoming more and more inequitable going, so they can work a minimum wage job and not be able to make ends meet, to be worthy of dignity? Well, I argue no. And I argue that the 5 police cars and the 3 ambulances to deal with one person in mental health would be better invested in housing with wraparound support and a guaranteed livable basic income. So those are my thoughts. Those are my thoughts at a time where We see growing global conflict, where we are at a time where we see a greater disconnect from our shared humanity. That voices like yours in the room, which are so warming, it's like speaking to like a friendly crowd. I'm sure if I was at the oil and gas club, they wouldn't like me very much, right? But, so I have a friendly crowd, but it's beholden on us at a time when so many people's dignity in our community is under attack, that we courageously speak out, unapologetically. When fascism is on the rise, you said you mean fascism, I heard one of the folks in the audience, is on the rise. When more and more people's human rights are being trampled down, we are obliged to speak up for everybody's human rights. Because you cannot pick and choose when you uphold human rights when it suits your political and economic interests. And I'm going to end with 2 short stories. What time is it? Sorry, I've probably gone on for 5 hours. Okay, 2 very short stories. One was my dad. He said, whenever you start talking about who to leave off the boat, you must stop the conversation right there. Because who are you going to leave off? That's a powerful teaching of God from my father. We're leaving lots of people off the boat. And the second teaching I have is my own hard lessons in life. I'm lying in bed, I'm in my 40s at the time, and I'm a single parent, and I'm grinding it out. I have 3 jobs, and I'm working full-time in the movement. And I just finished writing a press release, and it was after, I think it was when Tina Fontaine, the young girl that they found in the Red River, and we had a vigil at the Alexander's dock, and I was writing the press release. And it was always volunteer. You know that you're all volunteers in the movement. And I'm like, why am I doing this? I'm so tired. Like, I'm so burnt out. Like, why am I doing this? And then it came to me. I'm fighting for the right to joy. I'm fighting for the right to joy for my son, for my family, for the country, for the world. Because when you grow up in genocide, everything has been put in your place to strip you of your right to joy. So actually living your joy is a revolutionary act.
Yes, yes.
So as we go along the clock, as I do my time in the misogynistic, racist, colonial shithole, otherwise known as the House of Commons, let's not lose sight of our joy. Let's put joy in that work, in the relationships that we make, and the people that we pass along the way. Thanks very much.
We wanted to open up the floor and allow for about a 20-minute question and answer period. So if anybody has something they'd like to ask Leah, or
I've taught you everything. You have nothing left to learn. Oh, right, I'm not Yoda. Just
One of the things I'd like us to do more of as progressives who know the need for all these changes is to think outside the box, to learn more about the care economy. I believe the care economy is not just nurses and teachers, it's garbage collectors, it's everybody who takes care of the world we live in. And I suspect that we contribute a greater percentage to the GDP than the fossil fuels that are ripping up our backcountry. But I don't think most people know that. I'm not sure. I just have an intuition. So we need to know more about the care economy. We need to think more about small is beautiful. Iran is showing us that we should not be buying those F-35s. They're useless, expensive hunks of money. They won't patrol our Arctic. A $2,000 drone would be better. We could have 10, 20, we're going down a stupid road because we haven't spent enough time defining the big highway. Because I think if we really had a care economy, we wouldn't need a basic income. There'd be jobs aplenty for everybody. And we'd be paid for what we do. But that's taking care of children, taking care of people who are sick, like whatever. You know what I mean? So I just wish we'd think more outside the box of neoliberal global capitalism. Because it's destroying us. And thank you for what you do, but I wish there were 1,000 of you.
So just on the care economy, one of the other issues, and I mean, I've said it a few times, is that a lot of the jobs in the care economy have been taken by women, and we are the lowest paid. So not only do we need to think outside the box, we need to, eradicate, like when we want to talk about gender equality, let's start at income.
But we still pay our taxes. We don't put it in an offshore account, do we? We pay our taxes, us poorly paid women.
Yeah, and that goes back to paying taxes and not putting it in offshore tax havens for sure. But the other thing to think about is that going back to one of the things that I said in terms of one of the greatest failings of neoliberalism is putting the value of a human being in their productivity. And not all of us are able to produce in neoliberal, live up to the neoliberal expectation. How much does it cost then? If, let's say, there's lots of people that have, mental health issues, who, don't have enough to live. Social assistance or whatever you call it, social assistance in Manitoba, it's not enough to live on. You can't even pay your rent on that. So I think we need to think creatively about how do you build an economy where you're not leaving anybody behind, and we're still not doing it, and it's costing us. We waste so much money policing the poor. Policing the poor, not looking after people, not providing things like safe consumption sites, quite frankly, for folks that require, when we could be investing in housing with wraparound supports and harm reduction services. We spend all our money on the back end, whether it's in criminal justice systems, like Bill C-16 that's coming out. We have issues on femicide. Absolutely. But here's the thing, we're talking about after the violence has taken place. We need to protect people living in gender-based violence so they have options while it's taking place. We need to unravel the myth and bring everybody along. Part of that's divesting and putting money in the care economy, but ensuring that people have a livable wage as well. Because I was an early childhood educator. That part took me through university, and the reason I left, and that was after my theater career, by the way, was because I wasn't willing to work for $8 an hour with no benefits, no holidays. I couldn't even afford food back then. I would be starving. And we need to ensure that people, if they are working, that they have a livable wage as well.
But the care economy.
Thank you very much. It's so refreshing to hear from politicians from Manitoba. We in Alberta seem to excel in politicians who will do nothing but ask questions about questions. On the issue of poverty, I just wondered, why would an Alberta that is struggling with poverty want to join the United States to even create a bigger mess? Your views are very important here, and we respect you.
Well, I think they've already ruled in the courts that's unconstitutional. And it goes, I think that, it makes me reflect on something else. Like, this whole country was built off the lands, territories, and resources of Indigenous peoples, something that the Permanent Peoples Tribunal actually came out last week at the UN, calling on Canada's ongoing genocide of Indigenous peoples, right? You have Chiefs and Treaty 8 calling out the Premier about separating. It's a non-discussion. I won't even go into hypotheticals about it. We have a constitution. We have to follow the constitution. So I know that's a real worry in Alberta, and I want to honor that. That's a worry. But there is, if you look at what's going on in Quebec, there are certain criteria that the Supreme Court ruled on, and I don't have them clear in my mind. Because I was just looking at it actually before I left, just learning about one of the Supreme Court rulings, but there's certain criteria that it has to meet. And I think that's something you might want to look at. Let me try and think of the name. I'm drawing a blank. It's late because I'm on Ottawa time, so it's a little bit late for me. But it's
Clarity Act.
pardon?
Clarity Act.
Oh, the succession rule. I think you should look at that, because what the Supreme Court ruled is that you have to meet a certain criteria, but I think the judge already came out with a decision. The problem is that there's a normalization of violating the rights of Indigenous peoples, so it continues on, which is weird. I'm just like, another day in Canada.
Hi. You talked a lot about quality of life, UPI. One of the big issues I see fairly present, especially in like younger generations, and to some extent older generations as well, as AI. I feel that there is almost a certain level of fatalism that we have to embrace AI, because if not, like, it will pass us and then we will be beholden to whoever. And so I guess I understand Carney came out with like an AI plan. I haven't read it, so I'm not fully familiar with the details, but I just wonder, like, what are your thoughts on AI as it relates to quality of life, employment, and like what can you do, I guess, to advocate for better safeguards?
I'm not going to speak much on this because I'm not a techie, and I'm not going to talk about something that I'll probably sound pretty stupid if I try and talk about the technology of it. But I will talk about the environmental impacts of it. It takes a huge amount of energy and a huge amount of water and a huge amount of water. And one of the things that I shared actually with the fellow from the Major Projects Office yesterday is that everybody's talking about oil being the resource. I said, you want to know what the most precious resource in the world is? Clean water. Like, look in California. Their water is going up. Northern Quebec, from hydro and just the warming of the climate, where all the dams are, the water levels are so low. So when we talk about quality of life, I think we need to define what quality of life is, because I can tell you in Manitoba last year, we want to talk about, like, we have flood season, fire season, living in smoke, not having clean drinking water, still a reality in Indigenous communities in Canada, not being able to hunt and fish. You see that all through the tar sands in Alberta. Safety issues, increased violence against Indigenous women and girls around resource extraction. That's been proven. It was in the national inquiry. Let's talk about quality of life. Because if you can't eat and you don't have clean water to drink, and you don't have a roof, you don't have much of a quality of life. And who is benefiting from this? Like, who is benefiting from these billions of dollars of government investments? They could eradicate what's going on in their own city right now if they didn't spend that $25 billion lining the pockets of corporations. I was gonna swear, I'm gonna keep it in my spirit, I get a little racy. But seriously, let's talk about quality of life. You know, there was just a movie that was made, I saw on TV on the news today, it was made all with AI. Like, do we want that? Do we want to spoil the creative spirit that keeps us in touch with our humanity? I don't know enough about AI to comment intelligently about cautions, about the safe plan for it, because I don't understand the technology, quite frankly, like I just don't. But I do understand what I need to have a good quality of life. And I think we have to measure that when we talk about advancing and, you know, who benefits, who doesn't, how, and whose quality of life will it enhance. And I doubt it's going to enhance the people that are living in my current neighborhood in Calgary until tomorrow afternoon. So those are my thoughts about it. Yeah.
Okay. And I think we have time for one more question.
When we're talking about the care economy, though, we can't forget about the exploitation of the temporary foreign workers program. And here in Alberta, I don't even know if I can verbalize this because I get so angry. We're talking enough about the referendum question on staying in Canada, but the other questions are actually just trying to normalize racism and make us hate immigrants and blame everything, all of the wrongs that Daniel Smith and the UCP have done that are ruining our healthcare, that are ruining our education, and it's all immigrants' fault. You know, that's what she wants everybody to believe by those questions. So, if you want to speak to that, I'm just furious.
No, absolutely, but it's also happening federally. It's happening federally. Bill C-2.
Yes.
Bill C-12. Bill C-22. You know, we have signed international conventions. Refugees and asylum seekers and migrant workers are protected under international law. We are actively, through legislation that is being pushed through at a rapid pace federally, violating the rights of migrants, refugee claimants, and asylum seekers. I have a lot of migrant workers in Winnipeg Centre, and with the new rules, especially like, you know, we need to go farther. Like, we need to get rid of the third country safe agreement, for example. It is not safe. The only party that is fighting for this in the House of Commons, and I say this unapologetically, is the NDP with 5 people, with Jenny Kwan leading us. So I agree with you. And we know there's certain groups that are targeted in the rise of fascism. And one of them is immigrants, women, 2 is LGBTQ plus folks, right? We know who's the target. And Canada is complicit by using, from my perspective, the fascists to the north as the greatest excuse to water down the constitutional rights that include charter rights of people across Canada. We need to stay vigilant. Our human rights are under attack. And when we start talking, like my father said, who to leave off the boat, in this country, never mind south of the border, we're leaving more and more people off the boat, and we need to stop that discussion right there. Thank you.